The taxi turned off the highway onto a narrow road, and Margaret instinctively leaned forward, peering at the familiar landscape outside the window. 10 years had passed since she'd left this place with one battered suitcase and $300 in her pocket. 10 long years in which she had built a business, made a fortune, and bought this house for her mother, a large, bright place with a spacious yard and an apple orchard. The house Helen had dreamed of her entire life. The driver slowed near a familiar fence, and Margaret froze. The gate hung on a single hinge, crooked and peeling. The paint on the fence had flaked away, exposing gray wood beneath. And on the steps, those very steps that had gleamed with fresh varnish just 2 years ago, sat a woman in a washed-out robe that looked more like a rag. It was her mother. Helen lifted her head, and fear flashed in her eyes, real, animal fear that made Margaret's breath catch. "Mom?" Her voice came out hoarse. "What happened?" She didn't get a chance to finish. The front door flew open, and a woman appeared in the doorway, tall, well-groomed, wearing an expensive silk robe and a flawless manicure. Diane, her brother's wife. "Oh, Margaret's here," her sister-in-law sang sweetly, though her eyes stayed cold as ice. "We weren't expecting you. You're always so busy, so important. Never any time for family." Margaret slowly climbed the steps. Her gaze slid over her mother, thin, hollow-cheeked, her hands trembling, and then returned to Diane. "Why is my mother sitting on the steps dressed like this?" she asked in an even, calm voice. "Why is the house in this condition? I sent money every month." Diane laughed, sharp and unpleasant. "Money? Oh, money. You know, keeping up a house like this isn't the same as baking pastries back in Germany. The expenses are huge, and Helen isn't young anymore, always sick. Medications, doctors, it all adds up." "I'm not sick," her mother said quietly, her voice trembling. "Be quiet!" Diane snapped. Helen flinched as if struck. At that moment, something inside Margaret clicked, cold, clear, final. She took out her phone and dialed the first number. "Christopher, this is Margaret. I need your help. Urgently. I'll text you the address." The second call. "Shield Security? I need 2 of your employees. Yes, right now. You'll get the address by message." The third call. "Mr. Morrison, this is Blackwell. You handled my home purchase 2 years ago, remember? I need you to come in person. Immediately. Immediately. Yes, I know it's Sunday. I'll pay triple." Diane watched her with growing unease. "Hey, what are you doing? Who are you calling? What security company?" Margaret slipped the phone into her pocket and looked at her sister-in-law with a long, heavy stare. "In an hour, people will be here who'll sort this out. Until then, pack your things." "What?" Diane shrieked. "Have you lost your mind? This is my house, Edward's and mine. We have all the paperwork." "We'll see," Margaret replied shortly and walked past her into the house. What she saw made her stop in the doorway. The house she'd bought fully furnished, with new furniture and appliances, everything her mother needed for a comfortable life, was unrecognizable. Instead of a cozy living room, there was some gaudy, showy renovation with screaming gold wallpaper and tasteless furniture. Instead of the warm kitchen where her mom loved to bake pies, there was a cold space with a massive refrigerator and a coffee machine Helen surely didn't know how to use. And in the corner, behind a door leading to a tiny room, stood a narrow metal bed covered with a thin blanket. "Mom sleeps here?" Margaret turned to Diane. She shrugged. "Where else? The rooms are taken. We're a family. We have kids." "What kids? You and Edward don't have children." "We're planning," Diane snapped. "That's none of your business." Her mother. Her beloved mom, the woman who'd raised her and her brother alone, who'd worked 3 jobs so they'd never lack anything, who'd given them everything she had, was living in a storage closet, in the house Margaret had bought for her. Margaret went back out to the steps and sat beside her mother. She took her hands in hers, cold, wrinkled, so familiar. "Mom," she whispered. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you put up with this? Helen began to cry, quietly, soundlessly, tears rolling down her sunken cheeks. I didn't want to bother you, sweetheart. You're so far away. You have work, responsibilities. And Diane said, that if I complained, Edward would get into trouble, that he could go to jail. He's my son. I couldn't. Hush, Mom. It's okay. Margaret hugged her, feeling her ribs through the thin fabric of the robe. When had she last eaten properly? Everything will be fine. I'm here. I'll fix this. She sat there holding her mother, remembering. Their family had never been rich. Her father, Victor, worked as an engineer at a factory. Her mother taught elementary school. They lived modestly, but close-knit. Then, when Margaret was 15, her father died. An industrial accident, equipment failure, an explosion. The compensation from the factory was laughable, and her mother was left alone with 2 children. Edward was 5 years older. He was 20, already working, but not much help. He'd always been soft, weak-willed, the kind who drifts along and does whatever others tell him. Helen hoped he'd take on the role of head of the family, but instead, Edward kept living his own life, coming home only to eat and sleep. All the weight fell on Helen's shoulders. She took extra hours at school, tutored kids in the evenings, sewed on commission at night. Margaret watched her mother fade, her hair turn gray, wrinkles deepen, and she swore she'd get her out of that life someday. After high school, Margaret enrolled in culinary college, not out of some great passion, but because they accepted students without entrance exams and offered a stipend. It turned out she had real talent. Her cakes and pastries weren't just tasty, they were works of art. Her instructors predicted a brilliant career. Then Mason appeared. Margaret clenched her fists at the memory. Tall, handsome, from a well-off family. He courted her beautifully. Flowers, restaurants, trips. He said he loved her, that they'd get married as soon as he finished college. Margaret believed him. She was young and foolish and wanted so badly to believe in a fairy tale. The fairy tale ended in a single day. Mason came to her and calmly, almost with boredom, announced that he was marrying his father's partner's daughter. A smart match, you understand. Nothing personal. You're a good girl, Maggie. But you know, different worlds. That evening, Margaret made her decision. She would leave. Go far away, where no one knew her, where she could start from scratch, where her ex-fiancé's money and connections meant nothing. Germany seemed perfect. Her mother's cousin had once married a German and moved to Munich. They'd lost touch long ago, but Margaret found the address and wrote a letter. Aunt Elsa replied, dry, reserved, but agreed to take her in for a while. Saying goodbye to her mother was painful. Helen cried, begged her to stay. Edward shrugged and muttered something like, well, good luck. Margaret hugged her mom and promised she'd come back when she could give her everything she deserved. The first years in Germany were hell. Aunt Elsa turned out to be cold and stingy. She put Margaret in a tiny attic room, but made it clear that nothing came for free. Margaret cleaned the house, cooked, did laundry, and worked, first as a dishwasher in a small pastry shop, then as a baker's assistant, then, thanks to her talent and persistence, as a pastry chef. The turning point came in her 5th year. The owner of the shop decided to sell the business and retire to Florida. Margaret took a risk. She took out a loan, huge, at insane interest, and bought the shop. For the first year, she worked 20 hours a day. She baked, sold, cleaned floors herself. But her cakes became popular. 2 years later, she opened a second location, a third a year after that. Now she had a chain of 7 pastry shops across Bavaria, her own apartment in central Munich, and a bank account she'd never dared to dream of. 2 years ago, she finally kept her promise. She came back to her hometown, found this house, bright, spacious, with a garden, and bought it for her mother. She put everything in her own name but gave her mother full rights to live there, furnished it, renovated it, hired a woman to help around the house. Then she left. business, expansion, growth. She called her mom every week, sent money every month. Helen said everything was fine, that the house was wonderful, that Edward and Diane visited often. Margaret didn't know that visiting had turned into moving in. She didn't know Diane fired the helper in the first week. She didn't know the money she sent never reached her mother. She didn't know anything, because she was too busy, too far away. You don't have to do anything. Her mother's voice pulled her from her memories. I'll manage. The important thing is, you came. We'll sit, talk, and then you'll leave, and everything will go back to the way it was. No, Mom, Margaret said firmly. It won't be like before anymore. I promise. Exactly an hour later, 3 cars pulled up to the house. The first was a black Audi. A tall man in a sharp suit stepped out, dark hair touched with gray at the temples, attentive gray eyes. Christopher Walker. Margaret involuntarily held her breath. She hadn't seen him in 10 years, since she'd left. Back then, he'd been a lanky boy who blushed every time she walked by. Her school friend, her secret admirer, whose feelings she knew about but carefully ignored. Because there was Mason. Because there were other plans. Now a man stood before her, confident, calm, with an aura of competence and strength. Maggie. He came closer, and there was something in his voice she couldn't quite name. Hi. It's been a long time. Christopher. She held out her hand, but he unexpectedly pulled her into a brief, almost friendly hug. Thank you for coming. You know, for you, always. From the second car, a white SUV with the security company logo, 2 solid men in uniform stepped out. They silently took positions by the door, arms crossed. The third car was more modest, a gray Toyota. 2 people got out, an elderly man with a leather briefcase and a middle-aged woman holding a folder of documents. Robert Morrison, real estate attorney, the man introduced himself. With me is Linda Parker from the real estate agency that handled your purchase. Diane watched what was happening from the window. Her face went pale when she saw the security guards, and it fell completely when she spotted the real estate attorney. A minute later, she burst out onto the steps. What is this, a circus? Her sister-in-law shrieked. Edward! Edward, get out here! Your sister has totally lost it! What are you yelling for, Diane? He yawned, then noticed his sister and perked up a little. Oh, Margaret. Hey. What? You here to visit? No, Edward. Not to visit. Christopher stepped forward, pulling documents from his briefcase. My name is Christopher Walker. I'm an attorney. I represent the interests of Margaret Blackwell, the legal owner of this house. According to the documents, the property was purchased 2 years ago and titled in my client's name. Please present the documents that give you the right to live here and manage the property. Diane's face turned dark red. What documents? This is our house. Helen signed a gift deed. Margaret snapped her head toward her mother. Mom, is that true? Helen started shaking her head. No, honey, no. I didn't sign anything. I mean, Diane gave me some papers, but I can't see without my glasses. She said it was for the clinic. Forgery and fraud, Christopher stated calmly. That's a criminal case. Forgery? Diane screeched. Nothing is forged. She signed it herself willingly. Christopher turned to the real estate attorney. Mr. Morrison, did you handle any such closing through different notary offices? Morrison shook his head. No. According to my records, no gift deed for this address was executed. If such a document exists, it's either fake or it was filed through a different real estate attorney. We'll conduct an examination. Christopher looked at Diane with icy calm. And if it turns out the signature was obtained through deception or forged, that's fraud. Up to 6 years in prison. Edward went pale. Wait, Diane, you told me everything was legal, that Mom did it herself. Shut up, his wife hissed. They can't prove anything. Margaret stepped toward her brother. Edward, look at Mom. Look at her. She's living in a closet. In a closet, Edward. You didn't know? Her brother lowered his eyes. But Diane said it was more comfortable for Mom, that she asked for it. Do you actually believe that? Margaret's voice shook. Or was it just convenient for you to believe it? Meanwhile, Christopher pulled out another document. I also have bank statements showing the transfers Margaret made to her mother's account. Over the last 2 years, the total is more than $200,000. I'd like to know where that money went, if Helen, by the looks of it, received almost nothing. That's none of your business, Diane snapped, but her voice noticeably wavered. Oh, it very much is our business, the woman from the real estate agency cut in. If money was transferred for specific purposes and was taken by third parties, that's theft. Margaret looked at her mother. Mom, did you get the money I sent? Helen started crying again. At first I did, sweetheart, and then Diane said it would be better if she kept the card, so I wouldn't have to go to the bank. It's hard for me to walk. I see, Margaret said through clenched teeth. So you took my mother's card, pocketed her money, forced her to live in a closet, and dressed her in rags. What else? What else did you do while I was gone? Margaret went still, staring at the jewelry box. Slowly, as if in a dream, she opened it and felt the ground drop out from under her. On the velvet cushion lay a gold heart-shaped locket, the same locket her father had given her mother for their 20th wedding anniversary, the one her mother never took off, the one she'd said she would pass down to Margaret when she got married. Beside it were emerald earrings, her grandmother's, a family heirloom, and a ring, her mother's wedding band. This. Margaret turned to Diane, and her voice was terrifying in its calm. These are my mother's jewels. She would never have handed them over willingly. Diane backed up. She did. She said she doesn't wear them anymore, that they suit me better. You're lying. Margaret stepped toward her. You stole them. You stole a sick woman's memories of her husband, her family. You... Maggie. Christopher gently took her by the shoulder. Easy. We'll document everything. The next 2 hours were filled with questions, answers, and paperwork. Christopher methodically recorded Helen's statement, and Helen, emboldened by her daughter's presence, finally told everything. How a year ago Edward and Diane announced they were moving in. To keep an eye on Mom, she's alone, it's hard for her. How Diane immediately took over, threw out the old furniture Margaret had bought, hired workers for renovations, took the bank card. How little by little Helen was pushed out, first from her bedroom. Mom, you'll be better in the small room, it's warmer. Then, from the small room, we need an office for Edward. And finally, into the closet. It's temporary, until the remodel is done. How they stopped giving her real food. Fat is bad for you, sweets are bad for you, here's oatmeal, here's bread. How they took her phone. What do you need it for? You don't even know how to use it. How they forbade her from going outside. You could fall, and then it'll be our fault. How Diane forced her to sign papers, saying it was for the clinic, and when Helen tried to read, she took her glasses away. Don't strain your eyes, Mom. I'll explain everything. How she threatened her. If you complain to Margaret, we'll tell everyone you're crazy. They'll send you to a nursing home. Do you want that? Why didn't you call me? Margaret asked when her mother fell silent. They wouldn't give me the phone, sweetheart. And when they did let me call, Diane stood right there and listened to every word. She said if I told you, she'd tell everyone what a terrible daughter you are, that you abandoned your mother and left for money, that you're selfish. And you'd believe it. I didn't believe it, but I was scared, Helen admitted. Scared she really would, that people would think that. And Edward, he's my son. If what they did came out, he'd go to prison. I couldn't do that. What now? Margaret asked. Now we file a police report, Christopher answered. We have enough to open a case. Fraud, theft, possibly unlawful confinement. A signature examination on the gift deed, if that paper even exists, will show it was either forged or obtained under pressure. And Edward? Margaret nodded. He's my brother, she said quietly. I hate him right now. But he's my brother. She looked at Christopher closely, like she was seeing him for the first time. You've changed. 10 years. You were different. Quiet. Shy. Christopher smirked. And you were untouchable. The one I watched from a distance and didn't dare walk up to. Christopher, don't... Wait. He lifted a hand. I'm not saying it to get pity or to get something from you. It's just the truth. You were my first love, Maggie. And when you left, I thought I was going to die. For a whole year, I walked around like a zombie. Then I pulled myself together, finished law school, opened my practice. I realized life goes on. She didn't know why she was asking, why it mattered so much. And then you called, he shrugged. 10 years later, and I showed up within an hour, dropping everything. What that says about me? I don't know. Maybe I'm an idiot. Not an idiot, Margaret said softly. Just a good man. Christopher. Margaret turned to him. I need your help not just as my lawyer. I need a friend, someone I can trust. In this town, I don't have anyone left. You have me, he answered simply. You always have. You always will. Maybe, Margaret thought, fate was giving her a second chance. A chance not to make the mistakes she once did. A chance to see what had been right in front of her, and what she refused to notice. Or maybe it was all nonsense, and she was just exhausted, emotions running too high, and she shouldn't make any decisions in this state. Come on, she said at last. We need to sort out the paperwork and feed Mom. I used to be a pretty good cook. Christopher smiled that same smile she remembered from school. I remember. Your baking at the school fairs sold out in minutes. Now I make cakes, in Germany. I know, I've been keeping up with you. She raised an eyebrow, surprised. Keeping up? The internet's a beautiful thing. Your chain has an Instagram. The photos are gorgeous. Night settled over the small town like a warm blanket. Margaret sat in the kitchen, that same kitchen with the tasteless remodel, and watched her mother eat the omelet she'd made. Simple, with cheese and herbs, nothing special. But Helen ate like it was a royal feast. It's delicious, sweetheart. She lifted her eyes to Margaret, tears standing in them. Just like when you were a kid. You always cooked so well. Christopher left to prepare the documents for tomorrow's visit to the police. They were alone, mother and daughter. Mom. Margaret took her hand. Why didn't you tell me earlier? At least hint at it. I would have come right away. Helen looked away. I was scared, she admitted. Scared to disappoint you. You worked so hard. You tried so hard to make sure I was okay. And I let this happen. I let them into the house and let them take everything. It's not your fault, Mom. It's mine. Mom, please don't. I have to, sweetheart. You need to know. Helen squeezed her hand with unexpected strength. I'm proud of you. Every day, every minute. You made it where I gave up. You built a life out of nothing. And you came when I needed you, even though I never asked. I came by accident, Margaret said honestly. I just decided to surprise you for your birthday. If it wasn't an accident, her mother interrupted, then it was fate, or God heard my prayers. Every evening I prayed, Lord, let my Margaret come. And you did. And in that moment, Margaret realized she wasn't leaving, wasn't going back to Germany, to her pastry shops and business plans. At least not now. Her place was here, next to her mother, whom she had almost lost. Business could be run remotely. Her partners would manage. And she would stay here until everything was set right, until justice was done, until she knew her mother was safe. That night, Margaret couldn't fall asleep for a long time. She lay on the old couch in the living room, the only place to sleep, aside from that horrible closet, and thought about how strangely life works. 10 years ago, she'd left this town a broken girl. She'd come back a successful woman. But it turned out that money and success don't protect you from betrayal, that the people closest to you can be deceived and used, that evil can hide behind a sister-in-law's smile and a brother's silence. She also thought about Christopher, about the way he'd looked at her today, without reproach, without, "I told you so," without, "You left him, and I waited." He had just been there, helping, doing his job. Once, she hadn't noticed him. He'd just been a friend, background, part of the scenery. She'd dreamed of something bright, beautiful, dazzling, and got Mason with his betrayal. And Christopher had simply been there. Always. "You're such an idiot, Maggie," she whispered into the darkness. "Such a fool." The phone on the nightstand vibrated. A message from Christopher. "Can't sleep? Me neither. If you want, I can come over, just to talk." She stared at the screen for a long minute, then typed back, "Come." 20 minutes later, his car stopped by the gate. Margaret stepped out onto the porch, wrapped in an old blanket. Christopher brought a thermos of tea and a bag of pastries. "From a 24-hour bakery," he explained. "Not your cakes, of course, but edible." They sat on the steps, like they used to in school when they hid behind the gym from the PE teacher and took turns drinking tea from the thermos lid. "I was thinking," Christopher began, "tomorrow's going to be hard. Police, questioning, maybe face-to-face meeting. Your mom won't have an easy time getting through all that." "I know. I can help. Not just as a lawyer, but as someone who's there. If you'll let me." Margaret looked at him. "Christopher, why are you doing this? Honestly." He was quiet for a moment, looking at the stars. "Because I didn't once," he finally said. "Once, I was a coward. I was afraid to tell you how I felt, afraid to hear no. And then you left, and I realized that being afraid of rejection was dumber than any rejection, because I never found out. I lived 10 years with that what if, and now I'm older and, I hope, a little wiser. Now I know that if you want something, you just do it. You don't wait for the perfect moment. You don't get scared. You just do it." He turned to her, and in his eyes she saw what she hadn't allowed herself to notice years ago. "I'm not asking for anything in return, Maggie. I don't expect you to suddenly fall in love with me like in a movie. I just want to be close, to help, to see you. And then, we'll see what happens." She reached out and touched his hand. "Thank you," she said softly. "For being honest, for coming, for everything." Morning brought new worries. First, Christopher called. He was already at the office, preparing documents. Then, an investigator arrived, a young, businesslike woman with a sharp gaze. Her name was Natalie Harper, and, as it turned out, she was Margaret's childhood friend. "Natalie?" Margaret didn't recognize her at first. "You wanted to be a doctor." "Changed my mind." Natalie smiled. "Figured treating society of criminals isn't a bad option either. I hear you've got family trouble?" "That's putting it mildly." "You know," Natalie said to Margaret after her mother went to rest, "I've seen a lot in 7 years on the force, but this, putting your own relative in a closet, robbing her, humiliating her, intimidating her, there aren't even words. What are they facing?" "Diane, a lot. Fraud, theft, possibly theft of documents. If the expert analysis shows the gift deed is fake, then document forgery too. 5 years of real time at least." "And Edward?" Natalie pressed her lips together. "That's trickier. From your mom's testimony, it looks like he mostly followed his wife's orders, but accomplice liability is still liability. Community service almost for sure, plus restitution." Margaret nodded. She didn't know how she felt. She should have been glad justice was being done, but it was her brother, the same Edward she'd built forts with as kids and stolen apples from the neighbor. "Natalie," she looked at her friend, "is there any way to go easier on him if he cooperates?" Natalie sighed. "We can try. If he testifies against his wife, if he repays the damage. But it doesn't depend only on me. I can make a recommendation, that's all." "Thank you." "No problem." Natalie squeezed her hand. Hang in there, Maggie. You'll get through this. You always do. After the investigator left, Margaret went out into the garden. The apple trees she remembered from childhood, her father had planted them when she was just born, stood neglected, overgrown, but still alive. A few apples lay in the grass, red and ripe. She picked one up and breathed in the scent, sweet, familiar, home. Here, in this garden, she had once dreamed of the future, painted pictures in her mind, a loving husband, children, her own bakery in a nearby town, ordinary dreams of an ordinary girl. Life had turned out differently. She got a business, but in another country. Money, but unhappiness. Success, but loneliness. Maybe it's not too late, she whispered, looking at the apple tree. Maybe everything's still ahead? The phone buzzed. A message from Christopher. Diane hired a lawyer. Looks like it won't be easy. We need to meet and discuss strategy. Margaret smirked. Diane had decided to fight. Fine. She'd get her fight and lose it. Because the truth was on Margaret's side. Because justice had to prevail. Otherwise, what was the point of any of this? The next days blurred into one endless marathon. Interrogations, documents, expert examinations. Margaret barely slept, lived on coffee and sandwiches Christopher brought her at the police department office. The forensic analysis confirmed the worst suspicions. The gift deed Helen had supposedly signed was a forgery, the signature crudely, unprofessionally imitated, but good enough to fool an inattentive clerk. The house had been retitled to Edward and Diane 6 months earlier, while Margaret was busy opening a new location in Nuremberg. How is that even possible? Margaret sat in Christopher's office, rubbing her temples. The house was in my name. Mine. How did they transfer it without me knowing? Christopher laid a stack of documents in front of her. Look, first they obtained a fake power of attorney from your mother, supposedly gifting the house to you. Then a fake power of attorney from you, supposedly transferring the house to your brother. 2 documents, both fake, but executed a month apart through different notary offices. Primitive scheme, but it worked. But how? Real estate attorneys are supposed to verify this stuff. They are, but they don't always. Especially small offices with low client volume and every dollar counted. Christopher sighed. I've already sent inquiries to the different notary offices. The offices that process those documents will be audited. It could be negligence, or it could be corruption. Margaret leaned back in her chair. This was all Diane. Edward wouldn't have come up with this. I agree. She's clearly the brains of the operation. But your brother is an accomplice, whether he wanted to be or not. I know. She closed her eyes, remembering childhood. Edward was 5 years older, but always seemed younger, soft, weak-willed, forever drifting. Mom used to say, a good boy, just indecisive. Dad would shake his head. Not a man, just a doormat. Margaret loved her brother, but didn't respect him. And now she understood. Her father had been right. How's Mom? She asked, opening her eyes. The doctor called. Says her condition is stable, but she needs rest. The stress of the last few days caught up with her. Blood pressure spikes, heart acting up. Margaret clenched her fists. If something happens to her because of them, because of those people, it won't, Christopher said firmly. I arranged for the best cardiologist in town. He'll be monitoring Helen. Thank you. She looked at him, tired, dark circles under his eyes, but still composed, reliable. You're doing so much for us. I don't even know how I'll repay you. You don't need to. He smiled. I told you. For you, always. At that moment, the office door flew open. A man stood in the doorway, short, heavy-set, in an expensive suit, with a smug smile. Mr. Walker? He asked. My name is Peterson. I'm Diane Blackwell's attorney. Christopher stood up, his face turning unreadable. I'm listening. My client is ready to negotiate. Peterson walked into the office without waiting for an invitation and sat down across from Margaret. She understands the situation is complicated, but believes reasonable people can always come to an agreement. What is there to negotiate about? Margaret asked coldly. A mutually beneficial solution, of course. You see, my client also has certain arguments. For example, testimony from neighbors stating that Helen voluntarily handed over management of the household to her daughter-in-law, or medical records indicating that your mother shows signs of age-related dementia. What? Margaret jumped to her feet. What dementia? My mother is perfectly sound of mind. Are you threatening me? God forbid. The attorney raised his hands in a placating gesture. I'm simply outlining the landscape. A court case is long and costly for both sides. My client is offering an alternative. What kind? She relinquishes any claims to the house. In return, you withdraw the fraud complaint, and the case is closed. Everyone walks away. No one gets hurt. Margaret stared at him. And the money? The $200,000 I transferred to my mother, which your client pocketed? That's a disputed matter. My client claims the money went toward maintaining the house and caring for Helen. Unfortunately, the receipts weren't kept, but… Caring? Margaret stepped toward him. Have you seen the conditions my mother lived in? A closet? Stale bread and oatmeal? Meanwhile, your client was buying designer clothes and getting $500 manicures. Maggie, calm down. Christopher gently took her by the elbow. He turned to Peterson. Tell your client her offer is rejected. We intend to pursue justice in court. A shame, the attorney said, standing up. A real shame. But I should warn you, my client knows how to fight, and she has cards you don't know about yet. Is that a threat? It's a fact. Peterson headed for the door, then turned back at the threshold. By the way, Margaret, an interesting detail. You left the country 10 years ago and didn't visit your mother once in all that time. Not once. And now you show up. And immediately there's a scandal, police, accusations. Some might think you're just trying to take away an inheritance your brother honestly earned by caring for your mother all these years. That's a lie. It's an interpretation, he smirked. See you in court. Margaret sank into the chair. He's right, she said quietly. I didn't come. For 10 years. I called, sent money, but I didn't come. You had a business, work. That's an excuse. I could have found time. I could have flown in for at least a week, but it was convenient for me, at a distance, without getting involved in the problems. Christopher sat beside her. You're not responsible for what they did. But I am responsible for letting it happen. If I'd been here, they wouldn't have dared. Maybe. Or maybe they would have. You don't know. Christopher, be honest. Do we have a chance? We do. He nodded. The forensic analysis is on our side. Your mother's testimony, too. I'm ready. He took her hand. I know. The next day, Margaret visited her mother at the hospital. Sweetheart. Helen reached out, and Margaret hugged her. I'm so glad you came. Mom, how are you feeling? Better. Much better. That's good. Margaret sat on the edge of the bed. Mom, I need to ask you something. It's important. Ask, sweetheart. Did you sign any papers at the bank? Helen frowned. I don't remember, though Diane did take me somewhere once and said we needed to reissue the card. I signed something, but I didn't read it. When was that? 8 months ago, or 9. I'm not sure. Mom, this is very important. Try to remember which bank it was, what the building looked like. Helen closed her eyes, thinking. A big building with columns. On Main Street, I think. And the name, something starting with a C. Citizens? No, not Citizens. Community? Commonwealth? First Commonwealth? Yes, that's it. First Commonwealth. Oh, God. Helen went pale. But I didn't sign anything. I mean, I did sign, but I didn't know. Easy, Mom, don't worry. We'll figure it out. The phone rang half an hour later. Margaret stepped into the hallway. "Maggie?" Christopher's voice was tense. "Are you sitting down?" "No, go ahead." "A consumer loan was taken out in Helen's name, 8 months ago. Amount, $150,000. Margaret leaned against the wall. Her legs suddenly felt weak. $150,000? Yes, secured by the house. The very house that, at the time, was still titled in your name. But the bank has documents supposedly showing your consent to the collateral. I never gave any consent. I know. It's another forgery. Maggie, they prepared this carefully, over time. This wasn't a spontaneous theft. It was a planned operation. Margaret closed her eyes. What about the loan? Is it being paid? No, not a single payment in 8 months. The bank has already started foreclosure proceedings. If we don't intervene, the house will go to auction in a month. But there's good news. This is ironclad proof of fraud. You can't wriggle out of this. And my mom? Will she be held responsible for the loan? If we prove she didn't understand what she was signing, no. But it won't be easy. I understand. Do it. She went back into the room. Her mother looked at her with frightened eyes. What happened, sweetheart? You're so pale. Nothing, Mom. Everything's under control. The phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. Margaret, this is Edward. I need to talk to you. Please. She looked at the screen, then typed back. Where and when? The square by the old library. In an hour. Alone. No lawyers. Edward showed up 10 minutes early. He looked wrecked, unshaven, in a wrinkled jacket, red eyes. Maggie. He sat down beside her, not looking at her. Thanks for coming. Talk. Why did you call? I want to explain. Explain what? How you let your wife torture our mother? I didn't know. He jerked his head up. I swear, Maggie, I didn't know it was that bad. Diane said Mom wanted to live separately, that it was more comfortable for her. She said the money was going toward treatment, toward the household. I believed her. You lived in the same house and didn't see that Mom was sleeping in a closet? Edward dropped his eyes. Diane said Mom chose it herself, that it was hard for her to climb the stairs, and the closet was on the first floor. I didn't check. You didn't check. I know how it sounds, but you don't understand. Diane, she knows how to convince people. She always knows what to say, how to twist things. I believed her. I believed everything she said. And when she forged documents, when she took out a loan in Mom's name, did you not know then either? Edward went pale. What loan? $150,000, in Mom's name, secured by the house. I didn't know about that. I swear, Maggie. Diane said all the paperwork was in order, that the house was legally ours now. I signed some papers, but I didn't read them. You didn't read them. Margaret let out a bitter laugh. Of course. You never read, never check, never think. You just go with the flow and do what others tell you. First Mom, then Diane. Have you ever made a decision on your own in your life? Edward said nothing. His shoulders sagged, as if the air had been let out of him. You're right, he finally said. I'm a coward. I always have been. Dad used to say it, and he was right. But now I want to fix everything. How? I'll testify against Diane. I'll tell them everything I know, about the documents, the money, all of it. Do you understand what that means? You'll be testifying against your own wife? I do. But she's not who I thought she was. She used me. She used Mom. I was a blind idiot. But now I see. And you didn't see before? You know when I realized? He said quietly. When you came back. When I saw the way you looked at Mom in that torn robe. I saw myself through your eyes, and I was ashamed. More ashamed than I've ever been in my life. They sat in silence. The rain had stopped, and a ray of sunlight broke through the clouds. I won't forgive you, Margaret said at last. Not now. Maybe someday, but not now. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to fix things. Just one chance. She stood up. Give your testimony. Help the investigation. Then we'll see. He nodded and stood as well. Maggie? Yes? I'm glad you came back. Truly glad. She didn't answer. She just turned and walked away. Diane was arrested the next day. Margaret wasn't present for it, but Natalie told her about it. The sister-in-law screamed, resisted, threatened to sue everyone. And then, when she realized it was serious, she broke down crying and started blaming everything on her husband. He made me do it. I was just following orders. They're throwing each other under the bus, Natalie said flatly. Classic. As soon as they realize it's serious, they start looking for someone to blame. What's she facing? Given everything, 5 to 7 years, large-scale fraud, document forgery, and something else might still surface during the investigation. That evening, Margaret sat with Christopher in a small cafe by the river, the very cafe where they'd once celebrated their graduation, the whole class, loud and carefree. Do you remember? She asked, looking at the water. Of course I do, he smiled. You were dancing on the table, so happy, so free. I watched you and thought, I wish one day she'd smile at me like that. Christopher, I want to ask you something. Just be honest. Go ahead. Do you still... all these years... He was quiet for a moment, staring at the river. I was married, he said at last. For 3 years. To a good woman, but it didn't work out. She said I wasn't really with her, that I was thinking about someone else. And she was right. Christopher, wait. Let me finish. He turned to her. I didn't wait for you all those years like a loyal dog. I lived my life, built a career, tried to build relationships. But every time I looked at another woman, I couldn't help comparing her to you, and she lost. Every time. That wasn't fair to them. I know. That's why I got divorced. I didn't want to deceive either her or myself. Margaret took his hand. And now? What do you feel now? Now. He covered her hand with his. Now I feel like life is giving me a second chance. A chance not to be a coward. A chance to say what I should have said 10 years ago. And what is that? I love you, Maggie. I loved you then. I love you now. And I will love you no matter what happens. I don't know what I feel, she admitted. Everything's happening so fast, so unexpectedly. I need time. You have time, as much as you need. But I know one thing. She squeezed his hand. You're the most reliable person I've ever met. And if there's someone I want to build a future with, it's you. She leaned toward him and kissed him, briefly, gently, almost weightless. Now I'm done. Have you seen this? Natalie showed Margaret an article in the local paper. The headline screamed, Successful businesswoman or predator, a scandal around an inheritance. Where did they get all this? Made it up, Natalie shrugged. Margaret clenched her fists. What should I do? Nothing. Stay silent. Don't respond to provocations. Let the court decide. The truth is on your side. Easy to say. Stay silent. When the whole town whispers behind your back, when former classmates you run into by chance avert their eyes, when even the cashier at the store looks at you with curiosity and barely hidden judgment. On Monday morning, a nurse from the hospital called. Margaret, you need to come immediately. Your mother is unwell. Margaret got there in 15 minutes, breaking every traffic rule. In the corridor, she was met by the doctor, the same cardiologist Christopher had hired. What happened? A severe hypertensive crisis. Why? She was getting better. The doctor hesitated. Your mother. She was very upset, crying, couldn't calm down. The nurses say she was shown a newspaper. What newspaper? The article about you. Who brought it? We're investigating. Most likely a visitor or a staff member. Diane, Margaret whispered. It was her. Even from jail, she keeps going. Margaret, the doctor took her by the arm. You need to be strong. Your mother is in intensive care right now. The next 24 hours are critical. She needs your support. Margaret sat in the hospital corridor, staring into nothing. Christopher appeared, out of breath, worried. I just found out. How is she? Bad. Someone brought her the newspaper. Christopher sat beside her and wrapped an arm around her. We'll find out who did it. I promise. What difference does it make who? Margaret whispered. My mom is dying. Because of me. Not because of you. He cupped her face, made her look at him. Do you hear me? Not because of you. Because of them. Because of Diane and her dirty games. You're not to blame. If you hadn't come back, your mother would still be living in a closet, eating scraps, slowly fading away. You gave her hope. You fought for her. And you will win. And if I don't? Her voice trembled. If she doesn't, she will. Christopher pulled her close. Helen is a strong woman. She raised you. She survived her husband's death, her son's betrayal. She'll survive this too. They sat like that all night. Toward morning, the doctor came out. Margaret? She jumped up. How is she? She's stabilized. The doctor smiled wearily. The crisis has passed. She's asking for you. Mommy. Margaret dropped to her knees by the bed and grabbed her hand. You scared me so much. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Helen's voice was weak but steady. I read that filth and got so upset. The things they wrote about you. It's all lies. I know. I know who you really are. Her mother squeezed her hand. You're the best thing I have. And I won't let them, those people, take you away from me. Mom, you can't get upset. I will be upset until that woman gets what she deserves. A sudden fire flashed in Helen's eyes. Promise me you'll see this through, that she'll answer for everything. I promise, Mom. I promise. As Margaret stepped out of the room, she ran into Natalie. Found her, Natalie said without preamble. A nurse from admissions. She was paid $500 to bring the paper. Who paid her? Diane's attorney, Peterson. He passed the money through an intermediary, but we have it on camera. Margaret clenched her fists. That's attempted murder. My mom could have died. Legally, it's causing bodily harm, Natalie said. But given the victim's condition, yes, she could have died. We're opening a case against Peterson. He'll lose his license, and he'll be charged. And Diane? She gets another count, organizing a crime from a correctional facility. She coordinated the lawyer's actions through notes and messages. Don't think about that right now. Natalie hugged her. Think about your mom, about yourself. The rest is our job. The plan took shape in Margaret's head over one sleepless night. In the morning, she called Germany. Martha, I need your help. Martha Schultz wasn't just a business partner. Over 8 years of working together, she'd become a real friend to Margaret. Smart, relentless, with an iron grip and connections all over Europe. What happened? You sound awful. I need a journalist, a good one, honest, someone who isn't afraid to dig deep, preferably with access to national media. There is one, Martha said after a pause. Andrew Levine. He's done investigations for major outlets. I think he's between projects. I'll send you his contact. An hour later, Margaret was already talking to Levine. Andrew turned out to be a short, sinewy man in his mid-40s, with a sharp gaze and a habit of writing everything down in a battered notebook. He arrived the next day and dove straight into the case. Interesting, he said, studying the documents. What do you mean? Look. He spread printouts across the table. The notary's office that certified the forged power of attorney. Over the past 2 years, 16 similar cases. Different clients, different amounts, but the same scheme. Forged documents, property transfers, loans secured by collateral. Margaret felt a chill. I'm saying your Diane isn't a lone wolf. She's part of an organized group. Possibly not even the mastermind. Just an operative. The real puppeteers are likely higher up. Law enforcement is working your specific case, Levine continued, closing his notebook. I want to expose the entire network. If this works, it's a national story. Dozens of victims. Millions stolen. Corruption in public offices. Are you ready to go all the way? I am. Margaret was leaving the hospital. Her mom was improving and had even started getting out of bed when she noticed a car tailing her. A dark sedan with tinted windows. It had appeared near the hospital and now stayed close. She picked up her pace, turned into an alley. The car turned after her. Her heart started racing. Margaret pulled out her phone and called Christopher. I'm being followed. Dark car. I can't see the plate. I'm near the old department store. Go somewhere crowded. I'm on my way. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. Margaret Blackwell. The voice was male, low, slightly raspy. No need to run. We just want to talk. Who are you? Friends. Friends who advise you to stop. Stop digging. Take your mother and go back to Germany. Your business is there. Your life. Why do you need all this? Are you threatening me? God forbid. We're warning you. There are people who don't like media attention. Very much. And they're willing to do a lot to make it stop. I'm not afraid. You should be. The voice hardened. Your mother is in the hospital. Your brother is under investigation. Your fiancé is a lawyer without protection. Lots of pressure points, Margaret. Lots. You wouldn't dare. The line went dead. Christopher arrived 15 minutes later. Are you okay? He hugged her right there in the crowd, without hesitation. I'm okay. But they threatened. Me, Mom, everyone. Tell me everything. She recounted the call. Christopher listened in silence, his face growing darker. This is serious, he said at last. We need security. For you, for Helen. I'll call the agency. And you? Don't worry about me. I can take care of myself. That evening, Margaret met with Levine and Natalie. The three of them mapped out a plan. We move the story up, Levine decided. Not in a week, 3 days. The faster this goes public, the fewer moves they have. And heightened security in the meantime, Natalie added. I'll coordinate with colleagues. We'll assign an officer to Helen. Margaret, you shouldn't be alone either. And we need to move Edward, Christopher said. He's the weak link. If they decide to apply pressure through him. Move him where? I have a cottage outside the city, middle of nowhere, barely any reception. No one will find him there. Margaret nodded. Okay, let's do it. When her mom learned what was happening, she surprised Margaret with her resolve. Don't you dare back down, Helen told her during a hospital visit. Mom, I'm scared for you. And I'm not scared for you. Helen smiled. You're my daughter, strong, smart, fair. You'll handle it. Oh my God, Margaret whispered. They did it. They really did. The piece ran that morning, and the city exploded. Christopher hugged her. You did this. None of it would have happened without you. By evening, the news broke. 5 officials detained. Krasner arrested while trying to flee. 3 more agents like Diane taken into custody. Natalie called at 10 that night. Congratulations! Genuine joy rang in her voice. This is a win, a real win. But there was still the trial. Diane's trial began 2 months later. In that time, a lot had changed. Edward was living in a small apartment on the edge of town. Margaret bought it for him, not out of pity, but so he could start over. He got a job as a warehouse clerk and, for the first time in his life, seemed genuinely content. You know, he said once when they met at their mom's, I never understood what work really means. Real work. Earning your living. I thought that was for suckers. And now I get it. Turns out the sucker was me, my whole life. You've changed. I had to. He gave a crooked smile. When you're left alone, no money, no connections, no one telling you what to do, you either change or you die. I'm glad you chose the first. Me too. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, onlookers, relatives of other victims. Margaret felt no pity, only a cold sense of closure. Testimony followed one after another. Helen, calm, dignified, not once breaking into tears. Edward, head down, stumbling over words, but honest. Neighbors, doctors, bank employees, experts who proved the forgeries, investigators who uncovered the entire network. Diane's final statement was short and incoherent. She muttered about injustice, about being set up, about wanting a normal life. Helen, sitting beside Margaret, whispered quietly, "A normal life at others' expense. At my expense." The verdict came a week later. Diane Blackwell, 7 years in prison. The other members of the group, 3 to 6 years. Margaret stepped out of the courthouse and took a deep breath. The air was fresh, spring-like, smelling of melting snow and new beginnings. Christopher stood by the car, waiting for her. "All done?" he asked. "All done." She walked up and hugged him. "Finally, all of it. Let's go home. Let's go." Life slowly settled into a new normal. Margaret secured a long-term visa and decided to stay in the U.S., at least for the next year. Martha ran the business in Germany, regularly sending reports and consulting on major decisions. Here at home, new opportunities opened up. Margaret began thinking about opening a branch of her pastry chain. Why not? The city needed good cafes, and she had the experience and the capital. But most important, her people were here. Her mom, blooming more every day. Christopher, who had become everything to her. And even Edward, with whom she was slowly, carefully building a new relationship. Thank you for watching, dear friends. If you enjoyed the story, please support us by hitting the like button. Thumbs up. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to us. Thank you in advance, dear friends.